What's up, Gear Mortals? Trey Xavier here. Today, I want to talk to you about how to process your acoustic guitar sounds with the Line 6 Pod Go. The acoustic guitar is a beautiful instrument. It is as simple as it could possibly be. You strum it into the air and it makes sound all by itself. You don't have to plug it in to anything at all. You can just play it and it sounds cool. And actually, I think that's the way that it usually sounds the best. You just sitting in front of somebody who's playing it and hearing it with your ears through the air as nature intended. But it's pretty unlikely that you're gonna just do that, and that's a little bit limiting because it can only get so loud. So you wanna get it out to the people, probably through some kind of a PA system. There is a huge difference between either miking up an acoustic guitar for recording or hearing it, like I said, just standing there in the room. Massive, massive difference between those two things and using a DI signal out from the guitar itself and processing it in something like the Pod Go. So you might be thinking to yourself, Trey, why do I need this fancy modeler with all this processing? My guitar sounds great. Can't I just plug it straight into the board and go? And of course you can. I'm certainly not gonna stop you. It'll sound basically like this. Okay, sounds good, right? But wouldn't you say that this sounds better? I think you'd probably agree that that sounds better. So I'm gonna show you how I got from A to B and why it sounds better specifically. So the first thing that we need to do is make sure that the guitar is not going to feed back in between playing, stopping and starting in between songs. No matter what, you've always got the tuner function, which will mute the output of the guitar entirely. So if it starts feeding back, that's sort of your emergency stop, or you can just do it automatically in between songs, just so that you're not gonna get any feedback. But if you don't wanna do that, and the style of your playing can handle having a little bit of a gate on here, the first thing you can do that doesn't use up a block, an effects block, is go over here to the input, and you've got the input gate, and you can just turn that on, and then you set the threshold to a level that makes sense for the style of playing that you do. If you have a lot of super dynamic playing and you strum really lightly, or you have stuff that sustains a long time, if you set the threshold too high, it'll really kill a lot of the sound that you don't want to lose. You might have to set this per situation on stage, but if you don't turn it on, it's not on automatically. Unlike an electric guitar where you have to have either one gate in the front and then one in the loop, or depending on how you set up your chain a certain way, or like a keying type of gate so that it's opening and closing in the loop. It's not that complicated with an acoustic guitar because we don't have like a noisy high gain preamp that we have to worry about. We've got the input gate turned on. If you want to use a volume pedal for dynamics, that's already the first thing automatically that shows up when you make a new preset on the Pod Go. That could be useful for a lot of different things, like for a dynamic part in a song, turn it up or down. Maybe you just want to have more control over your performance, and not have to rely on a sound guy pushing the fader up and down. You can set these, the expression pedal to do so many different things on the Pod. You could set it to be the amount of reverb or the delay feedback or anything like that. So if that's something you want to do, you can customize the living crap out of it, which is pretty sick. For right now, we'll just leave that in there. One of the things that I like to do the most for an acoustic guitar is some kind of acoustic guitar impulse response, okay? An IR. Now this is gonna go in the cab IR section of the signal chain, okay? You are not going to use an electric guitar cab. That's gonna sound really bad. I'll just show you what it sounds like in case you don't believe me. Okay, here's what we got so far. All we did was just like lose all of the high end, which for acoustic guitar is very important. So instead of that, we are going to pull up an IR and turn this into an IR block. The sound of an acoustic guitar is one of a couple different things. It's either the sound of the guitar in the room, or it's the sound of an acoustic guitar being mic'd, one of a number of different ways, plus the sound of the preamp and the cable and all of this different stuff. The entire recording signal chain from the microphone into the recording software. When you plug an acoustic guitar in, when it has some kind of an electric component, it is a completely different beast. The majority of acoustic guitars use what's called a piezoelectric crystal, and that's the kind of pickup system that they use. And it's actually a strip that goes underneath the bridge. Now, this guitar is a Yamaha LSTA, and they have a really unique kind of a pickup system. It's still piezo, but it's 6 individual ones. It's one for each string. So you get a lot better separation, and it sounds really good, but once again, it's still the same type of sound. Now, this is completely different from a magnetic pickup that you have on an electric guitar. I'm not gonna claim to really understand how it works. You're gonna have to ask Colin Scott about that. But it sounds like this. It sounds good, but it's obviously different from hearing an acoustic guitar in the room, even if I just take the headphones off, you know? It sounds completely different. So how do we make this sound like that? To demonstrate the difference, I'm gonna grab a microphone and stick it in front of the guitar, and then I'm gonna play a little bit and go back and forth between the two so that you can hear the difference. Check it out. If you have ears, you can hear the difference between those two. It's not a matter of whether or not one is better or worse, they're just completely different. One sounds definitely much more like an acoustic guitar in the room, and that's kind of the sound that we're going for today. So in order to get us as close to that mic'd up guitar sound as we can get using the piezo pickup, we're gonna use something called an acoustic guitar IR. That's short for impulse response. It's an IR in the same sense that a cab sim for an electric guitar is an IR. It's a simulation of a recorded acoustic guitar body and the mic and the preamp and all of that, the whole signal chain. This to me is the easiest, quickest, and best way to achieve a very natural guitar sound. The hard part is that there's just not a whole hell of a lot of them out there, so I'm gonna put some links in the description below to the ones that I used. They're pretty cheap, and it's gonna improve the sound of your guitar drastically. Now I'm gonna turn on this Taylor 314 CE with a Schoeps mic. Doesn't that just sound way, way more like an acoustic guitar? The other one sounds good, but it's kind of thin, it's bright. Now here is a super advanced move, but it works great. If you use the mix control in conjunction with the level, which is kind of a tricky balance because the level is going to control how hot the DI signal comes in, but you can blend the two, the DI signal, which is super crispy, really clear, a lot of high end, and then the acoustic IR, which is going to sound more like an acoustic guitar, but can also be warmer, a little bit honky. So like right now I've got it dialed into like a 50-50 blend and it sounds like this. And then you get just this great combination of the two. Sometimes IRs can make it sound a little bit honky. You know, we can fix some of that with EQ, which we're gonna do in a minute here, but at the same time, it does, like I said, make it sound a lot more realistic. Here's what it sounds like with the IR blended in just at like 25%, so we're hearing like a quarter of it is the IR and the rest is the DI signal. Really nice and crispy. Still sounds like a guitar. So far we're doing pretty solid. I think it sounds really good, even with just this one thing on there, just that one part of it taken care of. Here's another really wild demonstration of the power of the IR, okay? Here is the acoustic guitar, no IR. Here it is with it. Now check this out. So this is my Kiesel LPM6, and this is an electric guitar that has a piezo pickup in it. So here's what it sounds like without the IR on. Pretty reasonably similar to an acoustic guitar, but here it is with the acoustic guitar IR on. Isn't that crazy? I think the acoustic guitar with the IR sounds better than this, but I think the electric guitar with the IR on sounds better than the acoustic guitar without it. I mean, you'll have to tell me what you think, but I think that that is absolutely wild that you can make an electric guitar sound that much like an acoustic guitar just with this little tiny wave file, which is what an IR is. I think that's convincing enough that it's actually kind of disturbing, to be honest. Like, if you saw me walk up on stage with this and this sound came out of it, you'd be like, what the hell is going on? If you're a musician and play guitar, you'd be like, that's crazy. And really, that's kind of what's going on with the acoustic guitar too, because the piezo pickup isn't really taking into account the entirety of the guitar. It's not the same sound as miking up an acoustic guitar. So these two sounds are actually pretty similar. Now, there's a lot of reasons why the acoustic guitar is gonna sound better, even going direct like this with the IR, but it's still close enough that it's kind of freaky. Right now, it's bugging me that it sounds so dry. So we're gonna grab a reverb. There are many of them inside of PodGo. I am personally all about a hall reverb. For an acoustic guitar, I think a nice sort of organic hall type of a sound is the jam. So we're going to put the reverb at the end of the signal chain. That's because we don't want the sound of the reverb to be narrowed by any of the things that it's going through, right? We don't want to put it before the IR because then it's gonna sort of tonally shape it before it goes out. And we want it to go the other way. We want all of the sort of tonal shaping and everything to happen, and then send that out into this hall reverb sound, and that's gonna sound the most hi-fi. So that's pretty cool, but it's short. I want a nice long decay. I want it to sound like we're in a large room. That to me sounds big and epic. It's gonna make it feel like you're in a much bigger place than just your local coffee house or whatever, the kind of place that I would probably wind up playing. Having trails on is good because then when you switch patches, it won't cut off the reverb tail as soon as you switch over. You don't want that. So the mix level is going to be very important because you can have a really big sounding reverb, like a huge hall sound, but not have it be super overwhelming if you want to pull down the mix a little bit. Still gives that impression of a much larger acoustic space, but without it taking over everything so that you can't hear the guitar itself. Reverb, of course, is going to be very style specific, and you're gonna have to dial it in to taste. I think a lot of reverb sounds really good on an acoustic guitar. Let's crank up the mix to something ridiculous and see where it gets annoying. Like even at a 40–50% mix, that still sounds good to me. It's starting to get a little obnoxious. Really depends, once again, on the style and how much clarity you want versus how much of that kind of feeling that you're going for. EQ is going to be incredibly important for the acoustic guitar for a number of reasons. Number one, the acoustic guitar, far more so than the electric guitar, is prone to feedback because the sound hole and just the acoustic body of the guitar is going to vibrate physically and create way more feedback than just an electric guitar possibly could. So you can actually fix that with some parametric EQ to a certain extent. It's gonna have a lot to do with the volume levels, whether or not your monitors are set up the right way. Most of the time they're pointed right at you, and if you don't have a good sound guy, if you don't have a good sound system and some experienced people working for you, you might just wind up with a lot of feedback, and you don't want that. I think a parametric EQ makes the most sense for acoustic guitar because you want to be able to cut very specific frequencies when you're looking for that feedback. This is probably something that you'll do at sound check. You'll get up there and start, plug in and start playing. You'll find some feedback. It's usually a really specific frequency that is killing your will to live, and you can find that frequency in here, if you use, for example, like a graphic EQ, they're set to certain frequencies. So you might not be able to find the exact one that you're looking for. So parametric EQ to me makes the most sense. You're gonna try and find the frequency that's sucking your will to live by pulling the gain down and then moving the frequency around until you find where it is. So basically what it's doing is it's cutting it like this, and then you move it around until the feedback goes away. Boom, you're done. Boom. If you are not having that problem, you can use your parametric EQ in a number of other ways to make your acoustic guitar sound way better. Acoustic guitars can be very honky. This one's a little bit honky, okay? So we're gonna cut out a little bit of the mid, okay? So we're gonna find the right spot. Let's cut even more. Widen that Q a bit. That sounds way better to me. 1 kilohertz is apparently a good spot for this guitar. Now you have to be a little bit careful because usually the spots that are honky also give you a good bit of definition. So if you cut too much and too broad, you can start to get lost in the mix, and that's not something you want either. But let's just do it a little bit more to show what that's like. That's still pretty good. Let's see what happens if I turn this off. Now, we also want the guitar to kind of shine, okay? We really want plenty of high end in there. So I'm gonna go to the high end and I'm gonna crank it up a little bit. 8K is a good place to start. Let's. You can boost pretty good on that 8K without really wrecking the sound or without being too extreme, actually. So here's before. Here's after the EQ. Feeling like maybe we went a little too heavy-handed with the mid cut. Yeah, I like that. Sometimes if you're getting a lot of feedback, it can be that there's just too much low end. And sometimes, depending on how it's set up, it can be a little woofy sounding. You can, within this parametric EQ, use a low cut. Take some of that boominess out. This is gonna depend a lot on whether you're a solo singer-songwriter type of performer or if you're playing in a band. If you're playing in a band, a woofy acoustic guitar can really ruin everything. So cutting out a lot of that low end so that you sit better in the mix can make everything sound way better. But if you want it to sound really full, you don't want to cut out too much low end. If it's just you and the guitar creating the whole show, you really want to have that full low end. But really, like, you don't really need a whole lot below 100. I mean, starts to sound pretty thin if you cut much above 200. But in the Pod Go, the amp block is always an amp. You want to make 100% absolutely sure that it is off. You do not want an electric guitar amp sound in your chain. Here it is without it. This is just the default. Like maybe if you're taking a solo or something, if you're on stage using wedges, it'll probably just be instant feedback. All right, let's save our preset that we've got so far. We're gonna call it Go Acoustic. It's dumb, but shut up. The next element that I want to talk about adding is something that's going to vary so wildly between styles that some of you are going like, oh, what? Why would you do that? And the rest of you are going like, oh, yes, I need that so badly. And that is a compressor. I really like the Deluxe Comp. The way that it just comes up, set up, is usually like pretty close. I don't usually have to do a whole hell of a lot. In this case, I actually feel like it's too much. Of course, you're going to have to set your threshold depending on the input gain of your guitar, the input gain on the Pod Go. The main thing that you want it to do is to raise the sort of gentler playing and squash when you're going really hard, once again, depending on the style, for a number of reasons. You just want to control the dynamics of your playing, or you want to, you know, not kill the poor sound guy and clip the input on the preamp. And you want to do it without it sounding weird. It's really easy for a compressor to do weird things like pumping, just making it not sound like an acoustic guitar, you know? What I like to do to test it out is play really quiet and then play really hard and see what it does. And check the levels too while I'm doing it. That you can hear very clearly is squashing it when I hit it really hard. If that's what you want, great. This is at a pretty high ratio of 6:1. We could pull it down a little bit. That to me feels a lot more real. It's still pulling it down a bit when I'm really railing on it. But it doesn't feel like it's squashing it. I don't really hear it being squashed that bad. Let's try 4:1. For acoustic guitar, you don't need to smash the crap out of it. It just doesn't need to be that strong of a compressor. It can be pretty gentle. It's just gonna raise up those low dynamics a bit so that the audience can hear you when you're strumming real gentle, and that you're not killing them when you're really hitting it. And then stuff like if you're finger picking and you need a little bit of a boost to get those ones you don't hit quite as hard to have a little bit more, then you might want to have a higher ratio on there. Right here, it's getting a little bit tricky as to the placement of the compressor. Right now, we've got it before the IR and the EQ. I usually like to put a compressor after the EQ. Let's see if that makes that much of a difference. I mean, it doesn't sound like drastically different. But classically, it's usually better to have an EQ first. We're kind of treating this IR as if it is the physical body of the guitar. So you can't EQ before the sound exists. So that's why we've got everything basically coming after this IR. And I think that's a pretty smart way to go about it. It might not really drastically make a difference, but at the same time, I think that makes the most sense. One thing that you gotta watch out for is that a compressor can make feedback way worse. A feedback loop is when the sound just goes around and around, okay? It comes out of the monitor, goes into the guitar, goes out back through your processing, and a compressor is just gonna take that and potentially make it louder, once again, depending on your settings. But, you know, you just gotta go in realizing that that could be a thing that happens, and you might have to bring it way down in order to make it work. Some people really like to use chorus in their signal chain. So let's go ahead and grab a chorus. All right, let's grab a 70s chorus. That is too much. If I'm gonna use chorus, it's gonna be just a little bit. Cool thing about chorus is that, once again, if you're playing all by yourself, it's just you, you can make it sound a lot fuller with chorus. You can also make it sound really cheesy really easily. Just makes it sound a little bit thicker if you blend it in just a smidge. I like to turn it up to the point where you can start to hear the chorus just a just a little bit, and then don't go too much further than that because it starts to sound a little underwater, you know, like. And then you just get a thicker sound, a little bit fuller, kind of sounds like there's two guitars. Almost like a 12-string. Depending on the mode that you're using in the Pod Go, you can set it up to be on a foot switch, and then you can turn it on and off. And then it's ridiculous how easy that was. I didn't set this up at all beforehand. I just now in the moment was like, oh, what if we do this? Just hit the mode button, and then you can just boop, boop, turn the reverb on and off, and they're color coded. So I didn't even have to think about it. I just knew that this was the chorus because it was blue, and that's it. So, boom, stupid easy. Easy because I'm stupid. If you're gonna use it in this type of mode where it's like stomp boxes basically, you can also set up a parametric EQ with that notch for the feedback thing. If it starts to happen on stage, you can step on it real quick and kind of hopefully kill that feedback, because it might have to do with like how you're standing. You know, if you're turning like this, maybe you want to stand a certain way and it's getting worse, you can pop it on and off. You can have it as a second EQ. You could put it like even right next to the other one and just have it on a foot switch and turn it on and off as you like. Personally, I think it makes the most sense to have the expression pedal set up as the volume pedal, which is kind of how it comes default. But we can do this crazy move, and we can set it up to be, for example, the mix on the reverb. If you want to be able to play with that in real time and go from really dry to crazy wet. You can do this with any one of these parameters, and that is crazy cool to me. It's so easy. There's this little column here, and you can do this with any of these if you want it to be the mix of your chorus pedal. As far as I know, any parameter could be this expression pedal or a second expression pedal that you set up that you plug into the expression jack. This is, of course, just one of 100 different ways that you could do this, but this, at the very least, is going to give you a really good starting point for sounds that you can use on your acoustic guitar with the Pod Go. This is the sound that I would dial in. This is probably what I would use. You know, different stages, different venues, different places. You're probably gonna have to tweak a certain amount of it. Luckily, that is extremely easy to do on the Pod Go, especially if you're able to use Pod Go Edit like we were doing here. But even just on the face of it, super easy to do on these kinds of controls. I like the Pod Go Edit only marginally better just because it's a little bit faster with a mouse, but you can do everything on the front panel interface that you can do in Pod Go Edit. If you guys are interested, I'm gonna leave a link in the description below where you can download this very patch that I have made here today, and you can take it and import it into your Pod Go, tweak it to your heart's delight, use it as a starting point or whatever to build your own patches off of. Hopefully you learned something today and enjoyed this video. As always, if you haven't already, please mash that subscribe button, smack the bell to join the notification squad. Drop me a like and leave a comment in the comments section letting me know if this is how you set up your acoustic guitar patches or if it's something completely wildly different. If you like to use fuzz or whatever, I want to know, and I'll see you real soon.